We were all once creative geniuses. In 1966, George Land, working with Beth Jarman, used a creative problem-solving test to test NASA engineers. And they decided to use that on 1,600 4- and 5-year-olds to test how creative they were. And the results were outstanding. 98% of them tested at the creative genius level. Well, they decided to follow these kids as they aged to see how things went. And when they were 10 years old, unfortunately, that creativity had plunged down to only 30%. And by the time they were 15-year-olds, sophomores in high school, that was now only 12%. So they decided to go ahead and test adults now, and so they tested 280,000 adults using the same test to see what their creativity was, and they discovered that only 2% of adults 35 years old, around 35 years old, tested at that level. The kind of creativity I'm talking about here is solving complex problems, problems that seem to have no solution. But what I'm about to say will apply to any kind of creative effort. So let me give you an example. The man in the wheelchair is Michael Johnson, who broke his back when he was 12 years old in a motorcycle race. Now, he still races NASCARs. He's an amazing guy, thanks to modifications to the vehicle. But there's something he couldn't do. He can't shovel his own driveway. So he came to my creativity class to ask my students to see if there was some way they could come up with some ideas to help him be able to do that. He said he wanted to be able to do it from his non-motorized wheelchair as cheaply, as easily, and as quickly as anyone else could do it. Students' hands immediately shot up. They all had the answer. So he called on one and they said, just build a carport. Another one said, hire the 13-year-old next door. And then another one really thought he had the answer. He says, dude, just bolt a blade onto the front of your wheelchair. You're welcome. So Michael explained very kindly why that wouldn't work. And I asked, how many of you out there thought about the blade on the wheelchair? And scattering of hands went across the room. The thing about a first idea is it's generally not going to work. It's very predictable, and if it were going to work, there'd be blades all over non-motorized wheelchairs everywhere. So we decided to start our project, which was a creative problem-solving method, running a creative problem-solving method called design thinking. And at the end of that process, 2 students actually came up with a solution that not only didn't involve a shovel, it didn't involve a wheelchair. They devised systems where it just prevented the snow from getting onto the driveway at all. One of them had a small lawn sprinkler hooked up to a vat of saline solution with a pump. Mike wanted those installed at his house immediately. So this is how you solve a creative problem with a creative idea. That's the kind of creativity I'm talking about. So why the plunge? What goes on? Why the plunge in our creativity? Children are born curious. They're also fearless explorers of their environment. And they're like this because they need to fill up this incredibly empty brain of theirs with knowledge that will help them survive in the world. But another thing they're also born with is the fight or flight mechanism, the fear mechanism. And this was great for dinosaurs, but it's not so great today. Instead of fearing dinosaurs, we now fear a society that can reject and judge us. And this kind of fear is disastrous to creative thinking. Our fears generally start with enculturation, learning the rules of a society, whereas people are telling you what you can and can't do and definitely should and shouldn't do. And that completely defines what you will and you won't do. But conforming at some level is important for a society to function. Otherwise there'd be chaos, right? But not at the cost of our uniqueness. There has to be a balance somewhere. So what are the societal forces at work that stomp on our uniqueness? Well, that's a picture of me. And I'm going to use examples of me here for 2 reasons. One, I have relevant experience, but also, the pictures were just bargain basement price. So you'll notice that I'm a little chubby here. I'm a little heavy set. I don't know if you can say chubby. Sorry. You notice I'm a little heavy set here. Well, that doesn't go over with peers, who are the first societal factor to limit our beliefs in ourselves. I was the target of bullies in such a big way that it was scary, and I wound up sort of hiding and becoming self-loathing. I hid behind a cloak of invisibility and baggy clothes. Friends are another thing that limits your ability and your behavior, your thinking and your behavior. You know, the tribe that you belong to. They're totally cool with you. That's why you're part of their group. But if you start doing something that they're really against doing, like maybe talking to another group or doing something that they're just simply against, they're probably going to have a problem with that. And so that does restrict your behavior. Another thing that really limits us in society are families and, parents. I was just a weak, timid cartoonist when I was 12 years old living in Texas. But my father decided that was probably not good enough for society. He wanted me to be tougher, more manly. So he signed me up for football, Texas football. And they really love their football. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. The coaches didn't like me. The players sure didn't like me. And my parents came to every game to see me play, but I never played in a single game. That left some pretty big scars. Parents can say things like, why do you have to be so different? Why can't you be like everybody else? They do this because they love you. And they want you to live the American dream. They think they know what is right for success, and you don't. What success looks like, and you don't. And often they pressure their kids into pursuing academic and career paths that'll achieve their idea of the American dream, which causes young people to crush their own dreams. Schools are another factor. Despite all the heroic teachers out there doing their best to maintain our creativity and build our curiosity, it doesn't stick around because the system doesn't work for that. For one thing, schools are a strong mechanism for teaching and learning to behave rules. And if you don't, you're punished. But creativity operates in a space that challenges conventional thinking and rules. Schools also make you study a broad range of subjects, which is important because you need a broad range of knowledge to get along in this world. But they also make us study some of these things at the advanced levels. And failing at those advanced levels can be devastating for your GPA, your chances for getting into college, and for your self-esteem. I was one of those kids. I wanted to go to art school badly. I was an artist, and I thought it was pretty good. But I couldn't get into any art schools because of my grades in math and science. Which seems weird, not getting into art school because math is bad. It just didn't seem right to me. So I've never been to college. I never went. I just started off on my career, and I wound up being very lucky and successful in New York, one of the top in my field, and eventually became a university professor. But a lot of people aren't that lucky. They can't overcome the damage that was done to them when they were younger. So all of these things and other things send messages that who we are is not okay, that we're broken. And we're absolutely not broken. But what we do is we bury our uniqueness and we conform to stay safe. Know that these things are still in us, they're just dormant and need to be freed. So how can you reclaim that dormant, hiding creativity and yourself? There are 5 things I'm going to talk about. 1, get your curiosity on. You know, you need to add unique knowledge to your brain in order for you to think better than everybody else who has the same shared experiences in the room. So instead of going to London and Paris like everybody else your age, go when you have bad knees like I'm about to. Instead, go to the Amazon. And I don't mean Machu Picchu where all the tourists go. I mean the jungle. The place where the plane won't come back for a week to pick you up. It's really fun. Number 2, push your comfort zone. Being risk averse is death to creativity. Facing your fears fosters self-growth and understanding, and it makes you less fearful. Now, you don't have to eat bugs unless you're curious, but you should do something that you just will never do in a million years. Figure out what those things you just will never do, figure out they were, and start checking them off the list, and I'm going to try that and see what happens to you. I think I was able to overcome my fears because my desire to attain something or to get something, do something, were always greater than my fear of doing it. And if I didn't try to pass into my fear, I probably just didn't want it very badly. Number 3, learn brainstorming techniques. Our brains think in predictable patterns. And that is not going to get any great ideas going anywhere. We need to find ways to break out of the confinement of our brain and trick it into being more creative. And there are a lot of techniques that will help you do that. The design thinking thing we did with our students was one of them. If you're a business or organization, think about the corporate structure that you have there and find ways to help it be more creative, to nurture creativity in that establishment. Even if you're not the boss, there are ways to do that, and they will value your intentions doing that. Number 4, get your courage on. You got to risk criticism and judgment by showing up in front of 400 students wearing a wedding dress that doesn't fit. But you need courage just to speak up in a meeting without censoring yourself, because the idea you have might be just the one that's going to solve the problem. Plus, you'll be appreciated for being the different voice in the room. Lastly, don't be your worst critic. Challenge the negative assumptions you make about yourself and try to frame them more positively. These thoughts can be subtle or they can be obvious, but you got to listen to the butterflies in your stomach, and you have to try to find what you actually are thinking about yourself that put a ceiling on your potential. So if you work on these 5 things just a little bit every day, you will start to release that trapped 5-year-old that's inside of you in order to create again. And that's worth doing. That's it, folks.